Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the FIDE Grand Prix. We are in Berlin, and it is the second round of action. We are going to go through all the games, and you might wonder, why am I naming the video what I'm naming it? Well, before round 2, I believe, maybe before round 1, Hikaru was on stream, and he said that he felt so bad for Ding Liren being unable to participate in the Grand Prix that if he won the Grand Prix, Hikaru said this, he would be willing to offer his spot up to Ding Liren. So we're gonna see if he can, first of all, I don't even know if that's possible, but it would be super cool if he did, because he actually doesn't necessarily have an interest in playing in the candidates, but we're gonna start with the game of Hikaru Nakamura. Obviously, he drew in the first round yesterday, so we're gonna see if he can uphold his promise. And the interesting thing about this game, there's two sides of this. So first of all, he's promising Ding Liren a spot. Second of all, Andrei Yesipenko, was the guy who Sergei Karyakin said should have been included in the Grand Prix. He's a replacement right now because of the absence of two players, but Hikaru, you know, Michael Jordan style. I took that personally. Let's see if he can kind of live up to the moment. So we have a 4 knights English, c4, e5. Both sides play a 4 knights setup, and white plays g3. Now the principled response by black is to either put a bishop on b4, pressuring over here, or to play d5. So d5 is a ultra standard idea. Takes, and the bishop goes to g2. So white is just sort of developing naturally. Now, normally the way this position works, black puts the knight back on b6 out of the way of this knight, puts the bishops out, and generally it's considered a main line nowadays to castle long and then try to trade off the light-squared bishop of white over here. And it's a very imbalanced position. Of course, you can also play bishop e7, bishop e6, and short castle, but Yesipenko plays a very rare move, I would say, compared to the others, which is the move bishop to c5. It's obviously, it looks like natural enough, you're just developing to the middle, but the problem is that after both sides castle, this bishop, even though it is pretty active, can be a target for 3 different things. Number 1, it can be a target for pawns, right, from either side. Number 2, it can be a target with this knight. Number 3, it can be a target with this queen. Queen c2 has almost never been played, so Hikaru obviously has come prepared with a new idea. This move has not been played by any top-level individual until now. So black has to respond actively and correctly. Knight f6 is one of the moves, so moving the knight out of the way, so, you know, this bishop can always slide back to one of those two sides. Hikaru plays the move a3, obviously looking to play b4 and bishop b2, and Yesipenko decides to solve his problems in an active fashion by playing the move knight to d4. Now, the dangerous thing about being in your opponent's preparation is that you are going to burn time, and potentially while you burn time, you're going to fall into the traps of their prep. The trap being that despite this exchange, white is still very much taking initiative, so b4 is the right move here. If black takes the knight, you take the bishop, and if pawn takes here, bishop takes d2, and white is actually winning. Like, it's not even a better position for white, it's a winning position for white, because the queenside pressure is so great, and there's nothing for black to do. Black is going to struggle forever to move this bishop. If black plays the move c6, you play rook b1, you also have bishop f4 here. Black is almost positionally completely lost here already on move like 12. So it's a difficult position. The best move apparently here is bishop back this way, which is just horribly ugly to play. Yesipenko instead goes this way, and Hikaru goes and gets the bishop pair and attacks the center with the move e3. Now, again, the position that white is going for is if black takes, you can probably take either way. To be honest, you can keep your pawns together, or you can open up the rook and try to create an attack, but just this is the position white wants. Bishop pair, c-file, d-file pressure, laser beam, crisscross applesauce, you know, from b2 and g2, and yeah, white is just doing very well. So Hikaru gets everything he wants within the first 12 or 13 moves. Perfect position for white. Now, unfortunately, you don't just get to pause here. You don't just get to go, I'm better. All right, bye. I mean, you still have to win the game. So Yesipenko plays d3, now queen to c3, and the idea is obviously pressure like this. Black should react very, very quickly with the move knight to e4, trying to get white to trade the light squared bishop and leave himself with some weaknesses. So queen c4, bishop f5, bishop b2. It looks like knight takes d2 is a fork. This is like the moment where like Twitch chat would yell, "Oh my god, you're so stupid, you missed a fork!" And the move queen c3 just hits the knight and threatens mate. Which I just showed you, but Twitch chat would forget. YouTube, don't tell Twitch. You know how parents are supposed to say they love the kids equally? Sometimes I'm not so sure. So bishop b2, queen d7, and now Hikaru does in fact give up the light scored bishop because he can play f3. If he doesn't play f3, if he plays something like rook c1, bishop f3, queen h3, and or queen h3 first, or queen g4, it's a problem. So white has to do this, and now we just have a very imbalanced game. This is like the whole kind of like nature of the position. My microphone's been doing some weird stuff, by the way. If it like cuts out randomly, I'm very sorry. It's been flashing on me. It's better the microphone flashes on me than just flashes me in general. But yeah, I don't know. It's been doing some very strange stuff. So this is kind of like the texture and the feel of the position. This pawn, it's not clear if it's a good thorn in the white position or just very purely a liability for black. So rook c1, rook e7, queen f4, f6, and Hikaru's trying to build up on the c file and pressure that weak pawn on c7. Again, as we've seen in many of the hypothetical examples I've given you of this position, black struggles with pawn play. Black has no pawns in the middle of the board. The pawns are all the way over here, so it's kind of difficult to build them up, right? So rook c1, queen e6. Yesipenko is looking to kind of untangle in some way, maybe get a queen trade, maybe try to solidify the c7 square, and he blunders. And he blunders something not obvious at all. He blunders the move b5. Now, on its own, that is not what he blundered. Obviously, he thought he was okay here. The point is that after bishop takes b5, he must have thought rook c7 was the idea. But that was not the idea. Hikaru's idea was actually much deeper than this. It has nothing to do with this pawn. I mean, maybe it does in the future. For now, it has to do with rook e4. Rotating the rook over, and now there is pressure on the diagonal, the straightaway, and the straightaway. Very tough position for black to hold everything together, because as long as this bishop exists, but it's not doing a whole lot, right? So queen back to f7, takes, and it looks like the position is okay. It actually looks like black is fine. Rook c7, rook d7, right? That is Yesipenko's entire idea, that you have to trade rooks with me. But here, Hikaru detonates something very savage. Bishop takes f6. As I always like to say, if a move looks impossible, and it is possible, probably you are in serious trouble. What's the point? The point is that if the queen takes, you take the queen, then you take the rook. So the pawn has to take. And now you give a check, and you deflect the king to one of three squares, all of which are a problem, and lose the game. Now, the idea is that you want to play queen b4 here. But you can't, because this, and the queen comes back to block the check. But when you give a check, the king has to go away. So queen g4, king f7, there is queen h5, and you hit the bishop. If king f8, which was played in the game, there is not enough room for the queen to kind of block everything, and the king is baited into a fork. And if the king were to go to h8, queen b4, and the king is not close enough. So an amazing tactical sequence here that Hikaru converts into an endgame where he has king and 5 versus king and 5 with queens, but white is winning. White is winning because black cannot possibly defend everything. You're going to either lose this pawn or all of these, and white is going to expand the fleet of pawns this way. It's an amazing little position here. Little reverse bathtub, right? So what does white do? Try to get a queen trade to get into a winning king and pawn endgame, centralizes the queen, it just infiltrates with the queen, puts it on a very active square, and just begins the pawn expansion. The white king is completely safe. The black queen is stuck guarding the pawns and the king, babysitting, and Yesipenko just resigns. He just resigns, because you cannot prevent the queen from getting to either g7, winning these pawns, or just the slow death that you will die when all the pawns come forward. Very, 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 very nice win by Hikaru. He actually called this a statement game, and maybe he is well on his way to giving that spot away to Ding Liren. I don't know, maybe he'll want it himself if he sees himself playing chess like this. Now, we are going to go through several other games. This game by Keimer and Vidit from Group C was a very popular semi-Tarash. This is super, super trendy nowadays, where black takes on d4. This got very popular in 2020, 2021, when all the guys were playing it online. It's a position that explodes in the middle. There's a queen trade, and black is a pawn down. Black is a pawn up for a little bit, but white has two bishops and obviously a better structure. Now, you might wonder why I'm zooming through this. That's because all of this has been seen before. For a very long time. Black basically just gives back the pawn, consolidates the position, and is like, I can't possibly be worse. White tries to bring the rook, the knight, the bishop to harass black, but black is fine. Everything is very well protected. It looks like the position's about to fall apart. And actually, for a moment, black is now down a pawn. But at the very end of the day, opposite colored bishops. So because black has bishops of opposite color, it doesn't matter that they're a pawn down. And you might wonder, why did this pawn not get guarded? Like, why did white not play f3? White doesn't play f3 because rook c8, among even bishop g1 ideas, it's impossible to hang on to everything while your rook is kind of stuck over here. So Keimer gives back the pawn and instead tries to play a little bit more aggressively on the queen side, but it's just a draw. And this game ended. This was the first game done of the day. Opposite colored bishop situation. You're not going to push this through because I have a dark squared bind. 2-on-2, you're not going to win. And the game went on for about 5 more moves. Yeah, black just absolutely solid. If white tries to sneak in here, king e5, king a6, king d6, and you cannot break through. It's impossible to break through. It's a draw. Happens. This game gets about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes of airtime. Yeah, I mean, some games just never get off the ground. Now, another game from Group C, which could provide a lot of fireworks, is Danil Dubov versus Levon Ranyan. Levon won yesterday. Danil just always comes to fight. That's why it was very shocking he played a London. I mean, when these guys play Londons, you know they got something up their sleeve. They're not showing up to make draws in 10 moves. Although, due to Shanklin, Tata Steel was a draw in 10 moves. So they got something up their sleeve, and Levon took it upon himself to play the very edgy knight h5. Now, before the year 2015, this had never been played in the database, which is how you know it's edgy. It's edgy because this is not even a threat. You can just take on c5. So white can just grab a pawn and hope for the best, you know, just try to play on the odd structure and give the 2 bishops to black, which is what happened in the game in Tata Steel, Pragnananda versus Karyakin. But in this game, Dubov tries to, like, you know, dance with his bishop. He's like, yo, man, you can't have my bishop. And then he attacks the center again. But it's crazy because they began trading early as well. And he, you know, Aranyan just returned back with the knight and he has no problems at all. And he has 2 bishops. So if anyone has an advantage on move 12, it's probably black. I mean, it's an equal position objectively, but, you know, the thing that makes this position really tough for black to prove an advantage in is the fact that the development is a bit lacking. And any way you try to develop will be a bit tough. So for example, you know, white is going to bring the rooks to the middle. Black still has to move a bishop, a queen, connect the rooks. So black does need to be a little bit careful. He does that by playing the move bishop c5. So for example, if black plays b6 and tries to play bishop b7, white can maybe jump in with knight c6. Maybe white will play knight f3, bishop b7, and just open up, you know, tactics on the queen. So black does have to be a bit precise, and he plays queen e7, and then he plays b6. Dubov still does get, you know, a little bit of kind of pressure here, but black just has absolutely 0 problems, and the trades begin very quickly. Rooks, it's now queen and knight versus queen and knight and 6. Now, losing this position at this level is more impressive than winning this. So if, like, Magnus beat somebody here, I would say it's more impressive they lost than even Magnus winning. Maybe it's different when Magnus plays, but I mean, like right here, for example, you know, you might not want to trade into an endgame where your pawns are just under fire for no reason, right? There's no need to do this. The players keep the queens on the board. Dubov gives a few checks. I mean, again, it's never too late to blunder something completely horrible like your knight for absolutely no reason. But remember, they're not submitting for guess the elo, so they make a draw. Yeah, I said I would cover all the games of the Grand Prix. Some of them only deserve about 2 minutes of airtime, so that's another draw. Here's a game between Vaitashek and Grigory Aparin. This was a very interesting game. Vaitashek yesterday beat Report, so he shows up to fight. We have an interesting opening here, so not a symmetrical English. I mean, symmetrical for about 2 moves, and Aparin attacks the center right away. He has absolutely 0 interest in playing a symmetrical position. And this one becomes a reverse Grunfeld. It's very interesting. It's like it's got the dynamics of a reverse Grunfeld kind of, with this sort of, you know, counterattack on the center. You can also argue it's a reverse Caro-Kann kind of position. So if you're curious what that means, it's like it's like white played the Caro-Kann, like e4 c6, d4 d5, take, and then c5. So this looks like a Grunfeld style, but this also looks like Caro-Kann style. If you're confused, don't worry about it. I almost regret going into that at all. The point is that this is why it's kind of like a Grunfeld, because you have the Fianchetto, you have the knight in the middle, Grunfeld-like opportunities to pressure the opponent's center, yeah, isolated pawn position. Now, you might say, is this a free pawn? I might say, hell yeah, that is absolutely a free pawn. However, it's been proven that black is actually completely fine in this position. Like if white plays knight takes b6, queen d1, king d1, a b6, and actually you're under severe fire on the queen side. So even though you're a pawn up and you have two bishops, your position sucks. I know, insane, right? You keep hearing me say bishop pair, extra pawn. You're like, ooh, I have both. No, you're still almost losing. So not a good position. Up until this moment, though, everything seemed to be going very well for Wojtaszek. I mean, he has bishop pair, he has isolated pawn, he has target here, he's avoided all the traps. But Apadin here plays h5. Now, if you remember yesterday's game, Apadin also played h5 yesterday. He played h5 and he played h4. And Wojtaszek was like, what are you doing? That's just a free pawn. I don't know, what are you trying to do here? I mean, I kick out your bishop, I centralize. But Apadin was blitzing everything. So I think he's either got the world's best poker face, or this is all his prep, or both. I don't know. I mean, it's a fascinating position that this can somehow be okay with for black. So bishop goes back to g6, and I don't think it really was okay for black, because a few moves later, Wojtaszek just consolidated, and he still has an extra pawn. And he's gonna win more if black is really not careful. So queen f6, queen g5. When in doubt, try to trade some pieces, right? Knight takes d4, queen f6, in between move, but now rook e2. You have to take my queen, right? So pawn takes, now takes. So white is now no longer up a pawn, but he's going to win it back right away, right? Bishop takes b6. The only thing about this position is the activity of black is sort of annoying. But that's it. It's just annoying. Is it good? I don't know. We're about to find out. Bishop back to d4, rook c2, and now bishop f1. Wojtaszek has to find a way here to trade rooks. So for example, I'm just going to hypothetically draw, like, you're not going to play rook c1 here. I'm just saying from a hypothetical standpoint. This is completely winning for white. It's not even close. Even if you can't win this pawn, like let's say something like this, even if you can't win the pawn because you have 2-on-1, black has a passed h-pawn over here because of the white has a passed h-pawn over there because of the damaged structure. Actually, technically 2 passed pawns. So 2-on-1 and an extra passed pawn, 2 bishops versus bishop knight, horrible position. So what white has to do is find a way to either trade rooks, advance the pawns, and not get overwhelmed by the activity. So here, Stockfish is giving a massive evaluation to white, like plus 2.5. King f1, avoid the knight checks, avoid the rook checks, plus 2.5. Wojtaszek is on his way to being 2 out of 2, despite being a last-minute replacement. That is absolutely nuts. King h7, bishop e5. Apparently, it was better to play bishop this way, by the slimmest of margins. And I guess it's because there's no knight g2 and knight e3, knight h4. What he did in the game allowed this absurd little move, and now you are threatening too many things. So rook d3, knight h4, black gets back a couple of pawns, and black has the perfect knight and rook coordination on the king. That's the perfect coordination because you can harass me. You can check me and bounce back and forth, and Wojtaszek tries his best, but now black has a coordinated form of activity. The pawn, the king, the knight, and the rook. So white was unable to deal with black's annoying activity, now there's even knight g3. Obviously, you're in check, but knight g3 is coming, or knight c3. So you're just going to be trading off some material, and that's exactly what happens. And the players agree to a draw. They agree to a draw because, yes, you can win a pawn, but you're not going to win this endgame. It's just unwinnable. a4, rook a3, rook b4. I cut you off. You just cannot move anything. I also don't even have to cut you off. I can just bring my king. Bring my king over here. It's just a very well-known draw. So, Apadin survives. Wojtaszek was almost 2 out of 2. I hope he doesn't run out of steam. That is the only question. That is the only question for him. He's extremely good. Super GM level. But will he run out of steam in these 6 games before he qualifies to the knockout? Right? That's the only question. Okay. Next game I have for you is the game between Etienne Bacro and Alexander Grishuk. This game was so strange. This game was super weird. So, Grishuk came to win today because he played the Pierce defense. I don't know the last time two 2700s played a Pierce defense. If somebody can find that, two 2700s, back row is 2640, but let's just say two 2700s, a Super GM classical game I don't know how many we've had in the last 5 years with the Peer's defense. And that's because f4 is good. Like, these aggressive lines against the Peers are very good, but even the quiet line, knight f3, knight c3, bishop e2, also good. This man Grishuk is going for like a a6, b6, bishop on b7. There's a reason they're not playing this. It's because it's good for white. It's just good for white. It gives white the chances, but it's edgy. And if white messes up, black could get some chances. Bacro, very principled, attacks the center. I mean, like, look at this. Come on. If I had an 8-year-old student who played like this, I would yell at them, but it's Grishuk, so I gotta yell at myself. Takes knight e5, and I mean, Bacro just plays a bunch of natural, developing, powerful moves and has a very good position. And Grishuk has like 5 minutes. He spent like 80 minutes playing these moves with black. This dude has 5 minutes to make 20 moves, but somehow he lulled Bacro into a similar state of like, hypnotizing, I don't know, but he has this way of lulling his opponents into also spending a lot of time. And right here, Bacro is like +2. It's just, he's done everything right. And Grishuk begins firing off moves. H5, the only move that doesn't lose. The only move that doesn't lose. He's like, yo, come and get me, knight h6. All right, the knight goes to e5, fine, knight h6 was okay, takes, f6. I mean, this looks like everything is falling apart. If you just back up here, and like e5, queen d3 to try to go for g6, and like try to play d6 in a moment, white is crushing. Bacro tries to break through immediately with d6. Head-spinning complications. This bishop is about to die for the cause of the pawn moving into d7. Knight takes, but the queen cannot protect both, so bam, bam, bam. Now, for a brief moment, Grishuk is a pawn up. The problem is this structure is horrible, but Grishuk once again finds the only move that doesn't lose. And he's trying to consolidate rook f7, rook d1, queen e8, again, only moves. He's playing the only moves. Rook f4, only move that he finds with like 1 minute on the clock, right? Just everything solidified. Queen is pressuring this way, but white can't attack anything. Queen into b7, rook c4, only move, top move. Queen f3 back. Now black can maybe even try to trade queens, but instead he plays rook d8, which is a fine move. It's not the only move. But here, queen e2, right? So Bacro is about to win a second pawn. Bacro's going to win a second pawn. Rook d4, queen a6. Right, so I apologize. Bacro's going to win a second pawn in a moment. Rook d2, queen back to c4. That's what I meant. He's going to win a second pawn. He wins a6, he wins e6 with check. But Grishuk correctly evaluates that he can sacrifice a6 and e6, and the activity counterbalances that anything that white has. Mind you, Grishuk has found all these moves with like a minute on the clock. Like, what the? Why are you even giving him 90? He finds like all of these ideas to activate his queen and rook together from a position that was extremely sus. Not in my hands, but in the hands of, you know, 2700, 2640, 2700, whatever. And they go into an endgame and they make a draw. They agree to a draw early. So even though Bacro is a pawn up, he decides not to even pursue anything because you're going to lose one of these pawns. You can't protect this stuff over here. Yeah, so a whole lot of much ado about nothing. This game between Hare Krishna and Wesley So was an interesting one. It was a Berlin A4. Yeah, grab yourself a drink. Come back in like 2-3 minutes. No, actually, it was a kind of an interesting Berlin because they didn't trade any pieces. So different from the Hikaru Berlin yesterday with Bacro, they traded very few pieces. And actually, Hare Krishna was pressuring for a bit. He had a very nice position. He played this very actively. Light squared bishop exchange and very powerful rook on d2. So actually, he got something from this Berlin, not like a terribly boring one. c4. I mean, if you look at this position, white is going to win a pawn. Black is going to have to play actively and aggressively to just not be completely lost. So he plays queen a5, takes, and now rook d3. And you say, why the hell did he not take on d5? There's a trick here, rook d8. If you take this way, I take d1, I'm too active. You take this way, I take d8, I'm still too active. Just too many things for you to protect. Queen e2 looks good. I got rook d4. I'm going to go for this pawn. Too much activity. So Hare Krishna has to take on d5 at the right moment. Right? He has to take on d5 at the right moment. He has to take on d5. Have I made myself clear yet? He has to take on d5 at the right moment. He doesn't take on d5 at the exact correct moment. Apparently here he had a chance to get a big advantage with bishop b6. this move forces rook d7, and then rook d4 hits the bishop, and if black plays passively, he's getting in his own way. This apparently was the way forward for white. He still has to prove that he's winning, but apparently that was the way forward. Let me show you why, because now the king is on e7. That's the difference, is that Wesley So has a mildly unpleasant task, but he just doesn't, like, nothing's really wrong with his position. And rook c2 is a constant problem. So Hare Krishna tries his best, but Wesley, like, look how cool, calm, and collected he is. Like, you gotta be that good. I can trade bishops with you. It's rook and 6 versus rook and 5. It doesn't matter. I know this is a draw. This is a theoretical draw because, well, maybe less theoretical, more practical draw because my rook is too active. My rook's just too active. What are you gonna do about it? Nothing. Trash. I mean, I don't think Wesley said that. He's a very nice guy. But, yeah, I mean, Hare Krishna tries his best, but Wesley, look at this. I mean, he sacks a pawn. I mean, technically he's down 2 pawns, but Wesley did a ton of that this game. A lot of flashy defensive moves. King e6, g5. A very, very nice. I mean, very, very confident draw by Wesley, it felt like, with black. Yeah, I mean, they drew because, again, losing this is more impressive than winning it. So a handful of draws. Very nice win by Hikaru. And I'd like to show you this game between Rapport and Fedoseev, and we have one more after that, and then you're free to go. So we're not going to be here a whole long. Whole long? What? Did I don't know. Nimso Indian. Yes, it's very rare that it's allowed nowadays. Queen c2, and you're about to see something real cool. All right? Tell me when you see it. You see it? What the hell is knight h3? You know what the craziest part is? It's been played like 100 times. What the hell is this? What? Now, obviously Fedoseev also felt the same way. Computer hates this move, by the way. Like, if you let Stockfish run, it doesn't even show you moves. It shows you a message like, what is wrong with you? Like, why would you? Anyway, h6 by black, and now we see why he played the knight to h3. Because f2 is going to be useful, and e4, right? Normally the knight is there, but now f3, e4 is the idea. So e4. Now, this is a game between a guy who lost yesterday and a guy who won yesterday. So Rapport is playing to win, but when you play to win at this level, you also play to lose. Do you get what I'm saying? You take risk, right? It's a heavyweight fight. So c5, knight back to f2, super imbalanced position from the opening that ends up in this middle game position. I mean, it's on the verge of an endgame, but we still have rooks, knights, bishops. Who's better here and why? White is better. White is better because white has more space without overextending. Everything is very well protected. Whenever you are looking at a position like this, you're looking at how... and by the way, like if knight d7, you know, again, d6, huge weakness. You gotta look at the weaknesses in the position as well. a5 is a move that tries to punish you for overextending, so you have to be very careful. So knight b3, rook d1 attacks d6. Fedoseev decides not to play passively, because if he plays passively here, his knight will die. Knight c1, rook c3, knight a2, rook c2, and if you ever play this move, knight a1, you should just be slapped. You have no way out. I mean, bishop e2, castle, your knight will die. Don't do that. So, a5, he sacrifices the pawn, and we are about to get one of the most wild games you have ever seen. Right? When you play to win, you play to lose. But right now, Rapport is up a pawn. But black is extremely active. Has Rapport made a mistake? Has he kind of miscalculated this? Bishop e2, knight c1, good luck castling. Bozo, I'm going to take your bishop. Oh my god, knight c1 is a crazy move. It's an insane move. Is Fedoseev taking over this game? What is Rapport doing? Why is his knight trying to go eat some pawns? Here's why. Because if you protect these pawns, I'm gonna castle. I'm gonna get my king to safety, and I'm gonna connect my rooks. And what is this doing? If you take my bishop, I take your rook. Oops. So knight g4 is actually a great move. Black comes in with the rook, and now Rapport plays one of the most savage ideas I've ever seen. So not this, that move makes sense. Black does not play king g7 because time is everything right now. If white can give a check and give another check, and the king comes out and give maybe even another check, you're gonna win that time, and then you're gonna get out with your king and your rook, and you're out of this terrifying situation over here. Time is everything. So black plays the best move, which is king f8. Now you can't get back with the knight. You have to only go forward. But Rapport here plays one of the most savage things I've ever seen in my life. In the middle of this game, he goes king f2, sacks the bishop with check, king g3, and when Fedoseev goes back to c2 to defend his knight, my man Report plays king to h4. Are you kidding me? And black has no moves. Black can't move the rook, the knight, or any rook. Like, rook takes c4 is impossible, because what white is trying to do here, I'm not even joking, is to maybe even walk up and then advance the h-pawn. In the middle of this game, white can go king h5, maybe king h6, h4, h5, king. I'm not joking. Like, white actually has the time to do that because black is so paralyzed. It's nuts. And this bishop can't do anything because it's biting into granite. So king g7, and here Fedoseev loses his cool. He doesn't quite understand how to manage the time stop, so he comes forward. Uh-oh. Report abandons the plan on the knight, and now there's a checkmate. There's a mate. Like, look, it's check. It's mate. It's a mate net. Oh my goodness. So now Fedoseev has to go back, but here comes my rook. Out of nowhere, it's the white rooks bullying the king. The black king. It's not the black rooks bullying the white king. Rook a8 and the same threat. It's the bishop or your king. So he gives away his bishop. He tries to sack it, but g4 continues to build this box. Insane move. And that's it. And you can't even take my pawn because of a fork. So Report is now up some pawns in a rook and knight endgame. He's going to win b6. He's up one pawn, but he's got two passers. B and H. You go to B and H. Wow, that is an old advertisement. And that's how the game is decided. I mean, he's going to push his pawns. You can't take ever because the endgame is just winning. I shoulder your king, you know, stiff arm like in football, and that's it. So he wins this in very flashy style. Look at this. Rook d8, disgusting move. Threatening to queen if you take my rook, and Fedoseev just resigns. Report bounces back in that group, and Fedoseev loses. So Fedoseev goes down after beating Apadin yesterday. So it's Wojtaszek up top, 1.5, then it's Report and Fedoseev, and then it's Apadin with half out of 2. And the final game that I would like to show you, oh, this was a crazy game. This game was absolutely nuts. Shirov comes to fight, and Dominguez Perez is a solid, but I mean, he's a cold-blooded killer. That man, first of all, he has the coolest name ever. His nickname is Le Dope, because Dominguez Perez, D-O-P-E, Le Dope. Like, you know, like LeBron. They put Le and then whatever. Lacoste, Le Dope. I mean, yeah, he's got a cool-ass nickname. So, let's go. E4. And he doesn't play into his Najdorf. He plays knight c3 and an early d4, voluntarily retreating back to d2. Now, this is an anti-Sicilian that was popularized. I think Magnus actually played this with white a couple of years ago. And since then, many courses have been made. Look how weird this game gets. It's like black mouse slipped a fianchetto. That is not where the bishop goes, but there's a queen there. How rare is this? So f4, knight f6, and now e5. I mean, you're a move away from winning the guy's queen. g3. But this has all been played before. That's the craziest thing. I mean, Magnus or some of these top other players, they go for this, and it's so odd. It's so imbalanced. Either player can win this game. Rook e8, and up until move 13, I believe, right here, they were following a couple of other games. But here, Dominguez Perez plays the top stockfish move, which I don't believe has ever been played before. Maybe one time, and that's d5. And I mean, folks, let me tell you something. You and I are below the pay grade of the calculation that's involved here. I mean, just don't play here and hang your queen. But there is so many tactics to calculate here. h3 hitting the bishop. At any moment, this can blast open. This blasts open. This diagonal blasts open. So h3 is the best move, kicking out the bishop. And now white plays g4. The idea of g4 is to play g5. Very simple, right? So knight takes on e4, hits the queen. We have knight e4, bishop e4. And Shirov here gets his queen out of the way so that he can play f5. If you take, I take your knight. If you take, I take this, then I take your knight. So you can't do that. Actually, I can just take your knight first, and then I can take your bishop. Even better. So even better there. However, if you play something like knight takes c2, I take the queen first, then I come back and take your knight. So you can't take c2. So queen a5, right? I mean, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces attacking the king. Here comes f5. I don't know who's winning this game. I mean, it looks like both sides, it's hanging on a knife's edge, right? Bishop d5. We have rook h2, takes, and I believe in this position, there was a completely ridiculous computer line. I think the computer line was knight e2 for white to prevent knight c3. That move at least makes sense. But knight d6, Stockfish wanted queen h1, if I'm not mistaken. Was it? Yes. Yes. Stockfish wanted queen h1. Okay, you know, okay. Instead of that, Shirov saw a pawn that he could take, so he took it because he's a human being, and he also has opportunities to take and play queen f7, queen f7 with his rook. So no human being plays queen h1. I mean, it's ridiculous. Nobody ever plays that, ever. Not Magnus, not Hikaru, nobody. Knight d6, queen back to f3, and white is still chilling. White has a very nice position here. By the way, you can play queen h1 here again, but now it's just stupid because black is very fast. Knight c4 actually does work, believe it or not. bc4 looks okay, but yeah, you're dying here. One guy's dying, and it's not Ledope. So queen d1 played, but now knight b5, and I guess Shirov miscalculated something. I don't know exactly what. So the point is that queen f2 prevents the knight from moving because there's this, and you're threatening queen f7 mate. So Shirov must have not liked something. He must have not liked the move e3, and it's not clear what you do with the queen. Like, can you go to h4 and try to get the bishop? I don't know. You know, maybe bishop g7, bishop g7. I mean, king takes g7, you can probably just take and play queen f6. So I'm not exactly certain why he didn't like queen f2. I haven't had a chance to speak with the guy. He's a scary guy. He is a scary-looking gentleman. So queen d1, but now knight b5. And the point is that black is just going to come back. And what I think Shirov maybe wanted was to shut the door on the bishop. The problem is the bishop can always come around forward. So it can try to find a way in like this. So he decides to play rook c2 to kick the queen out. Yeah, the problem is the queen's staying. Queen is going to stay pressuring this diagonal. And now the tide of the game shifts because it's the white king getting hunted. So rook d8, queen a5, and you can gobble on a7, but the black rooks are pissed off. The black position is pissed off, and this was just a pure attacking game by both sides. Obviously, this is a really nice asset to have as well. It's a lever into the position of white, and Ledope converts it very beautifully. Queen d6, rook takes e2, and Shirov resigns because of the overwhelming pressure here on the king, whereas this king ended up surviving the war. This king did not. So Ledope leads Group D between Wesley So, Hare Krishna, and Shirov. Hikaru leads Group A. Wojtaszek leads Group B, and in Group C we have Levon Aranyan, but there's a link in the description. You can go check it out for yourself. Very fun opening rounds. 4 more to go. Appreciate y'all hanging out. I will see you for round number 3. Get out of here. Enjoy your weekend.